Peter Hayde.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, after 36 excellent speeches, this debate has revealed very serious objections from all sides of the House to the constituency changes proposed in this bill. Indeed, as the Honourable Member for Belfast North and the Honourable Member for Great Grimsby pointed out, almost nobody on either side of the House actually spoke fully in favour of this bill, with the exception of the Deputy Prime Minister. The members for Broxbourne, Aldridge Brownhills and Christchurch all made impassioned speeches about the dangers of diminishing the size of backbenchers compared with the executive in terms of the balance of power within this Parliament. The Right Honourable Member for Halton Price and Howden made a telling point that by abolishing public inquiries, what you will actually see is triggering a much greater spate of judicial actions and objections to the new constituencies from local electors. And the honourable members for Glasgow North West, for Camborne, for the Western Isles and Rutherglen all pointed out the very serious problems of staging the referendum on the alternative vote on the same day as elections, national elections in Scotland and Wales. And my honourable friend, the member for Caerphilly, pointed out the astonishing reality that the Deputy Prime Minister in this government failed to consult the governments of Northern Ireland, of Scotland and of Wales on their decision to simply impose this referendum on the same day as their elections, and by the way, also on the same day as elections for local councils on different electorates. Mr. Speaker, the Honourable Member for Nottingham North, the Chairman of the Select Committee, a distinguished Select Committee Chairman, made the point that not only has there been no consultation across the country and with the elected governments of Northern Ireland, Scotland and Wales, there's been no consultation with this House. No pre-legislative scrutiny, no recognition of the need to take and build constitutional reform bills by consensus, a point also made very powerfully by the Honourable Member for Belfast North and by Right Honourable friend the Member for Torvine, who made the point with his Northern Ireland experience of the importance of constitutional change being taken forward on a basis of consensus rather than a basis of simply imposing change, as this bill is indeed doing. Mr. Speaker, the Deputy Prime Minister, the leader of the Liberal Democrats, has moved a bill changing constituencies in a way that is fair only to the Conservative Party. Some Liberal Democrat leader he is. It's grossly unfair to Labour. It's especially and blatantly unfair to Wales, which will lose fully a quarter of its representation. It's also grotesquely unfair to local communities by imposing on them new constituencies from Whitehall and depriving them of their traditional rights to be fully involved in a process that is at the very heart of our system of parliamentary democracy. Having swallowed a budget that is unfair to the poor, unfair to pensioners and, quite astonishingly, most unfair to the poorest parts of Britain, including the north east of England and Wales, now the government is also destroying the fairness at the heart of our parliamentary democracy. They trumpet the case for equalisation, for equal constituencies, like it's a novel concept. But, Mr. Speaker, equalisation has been at the all-party principle behind our constituency system for generations. We're all signed up to it. But the Boundary Commission has applied it in a flexible way over the generations, in a way that's independent, takes proper account of local views, of community identity, of rurality and of sparsity. In other words, the Boundary Commission has operated the equalisation principle by consensus, in a way that's fair, practical and sensible. The government has abandoned that consensus in a way that's unfair, impractical and arrogant. Of course I give way.
I'm grateful to the Right Honourable Gentleman for giving way. I've got 84,000 constituents. How many does he have?
Just under 60,000, but what is different from my constituency, and I'd be happy to see a greater number of constituents in my constituency if this bill was proceeding on a fair basis, with public inquiries and local consultation taken into effect. And the only concession by the government that the equalisation principle must be flexible is in the protection given to potentially 4 geographically large seats in Scotland, 3 of them Liberal held. As the honourable member, my honourable friend, the member for Aberdeen North, pointed out, we can only conclude in the case of Ross, Skye and Lochaber that this preferential treatment was the price to keep its member, the former leader of the Liberal Democrats, from defecting to the Labour Party. So obviously in the government's definition of equalisation, as my honourable friend, the member for East Kilbride, pointed out, some seats are more equal than others. Wales, because of its own special characteristics, has always had special consideration by this Parliament and by the Boundary Commission, with cross-party support over the generations. For these reasons, Parliament first decided in 1947 that there should be no fewer than 35 Welsh seats. Since then, rises in and shifts between the population over the last 60 years have led the Boundary Commission to increase the number of seats by a further 5 to 40. As a note from the Commons Library of the 28th of July 2010 confirms in paragraph 3.1, Mr. Speaker, during the passage of the Boundary Commission's Bill in 1992, the then Home Secretary, the Right Honourable Member for Rushcliffe, rejected the argument that over-representation of Wales should be tackled, referring to it as a long-standing constitutional arrangement, a point eloquently explained by my honourable friend, the member for Caerphilly. Yet this bill will impose on Wales the most savage cut of all. And the member for Cardiff North actually celebrated this. Wales will lose 3 times the proportion of MPs as the average for the rest of the United Kingdom, a reduction of fully a quarter, from 40 to 30 MPs. As my right honourable member, my friend for Torvine said, how can that possibly be justified? Wales is long used to Tories treating it unfairly and punitively. Now the Liberal Democrats are doing the very same thing. And I hope the Minister and I hope the Deputy Prime Minister will listen to the arguments made by the honourable member for Ceredigion, asking that the changes in Wales are at least delayed until after the referendum, as successive arguments have been made from within the Welsh Conservative Party. Mr. Speaker, in Mid and West Wales, vast rural areas, the 4 constituencies, none of them Labour-held, of Brecon and Radnor, Montgomeryshire, Ceredigion, cover hundreds of square miles. Yet under this bill, these 4 large seats will become 2 monster ones, each thousands of square miles in size. Under this bill, every Parliament and every Boundary Commission has understood and accepted. Until this bill, rather, every Boundary Commission, every Parliament has accepted an elementary verity about the Welsh valleys. In former coal mining constituencies, it's impossible to visit the next valley by the shortest route because that happens to be over the top of a mountain. The only way to do so is by travelling either down to the bottom of the valley or up to the top of the valley and go right around to the next one. The bill will produce a monumental list of other anomalies. The honourable member for the Isle of Wight is absolutely right to be incandescent about the carve-up of his island constituency. But, Mr. Speaker, I say to the rest of the House, just wait until everybody in all of your constituencies realise what is going to be done to their own constituencies, based not on natural communities, not on natural towns or parts of cities, but on an arithmetical diktat imposed by the Deputy Prime Minister and the government on the boundary commissions. They shake their heads, but they will find, I predict, Mr. Speaker, when it comes to their local constituencies, there will be rebellions in their own areas against this diktat from the centre on an arithmetical basis. Mr. Speaker, what we're seeing and what most people find most offensive about the bill is the way that it sweeps away local democracy, as the honourable member for Foyle said. For generations, constituency boundaries have been reviewed and adjusted by local agreement, not by central imposition. Local people have had the opportunity to object if community identities were threatened or unsuitable mergers with nearby towns or villages proposed. Formal hearings would hear representations and a final decision agreed, if not always by total consensus, then at least with broad support, a process which last time necessarily took fully 7 years in England. But the bill has unilaterally dumped this, for a rigid 2 years deadline in a straightforward fix, abolishing the right to trigger public inquiries and destroying a bipartisan independent system of drawing boundaries up which has been the envy of countries elsewhere in the world. So much for big society localism. The Prime Minister tells us the big society is about empowering local communities, a favourite phrase of the Deputy Prime Minister. But as the member for Aldridge Brownhills has said, it destroys the essence of the British parliamentary democratic system by imposing from the centre rather than developing from above as a pattern of constituencies. It rides roughshod over and breaks up local communities, as my honourable friend the member for Slough has said. The bill proposes an arbitrary and partisan reduction by 50 to 600 seats. Why? Because it would hurt Labour the most. A steeper reduction would have abolished too many Conservative seats. Most outrageous, the government has said they intend to redraw the boundaries based on the December 2010 register when they know that the current register is missing over 3.5 million eligible voters, predominantly the young, poor and black and ethnic minority social groups. As my honourable friend the member for the Vale of Cloyne has so tellingly argued as a champion of this point, the problem of underrepresentation is greatest in urban areas, in student towns and coastal areas of highest social deprivation. As my honourable friend, the member for South Islington and Finsbury has said, London will be especially badly hit. Mr. Speaker, the Liberal Democrat leader has allowed himself to be sandbagged by his Tory partners in his otherwise laudable attempt to introduce a fairer electoral system, risking a once-in-a-generation opportunity for electoral reform. Instead of introducing a separate bill on the alternative vote referendum, which had been supported by Labour in a vote through Parliament in line with our manifesto commitment, the government has spatchcocked it together with the most blatant gerrymander of parliamentary constituency boundaries since the days of rotten boroughs. As our amendment argues, Mr. Speaker, the government should decouple the proposals into two separate bills, one on the alternative referendum, one on constituencies, and in the latter, the constituency one, they should ensure that the original, fairer, more transparent and consensual boundary review system is restored, that new boundaries are not applied in such a dogmatic, rigid and politically discriminatory fashion. They should ensure that Wales is treated fairly and not punitively, and statutory automatic registration from other public databases must be included in the legislation. That way, Mr. Speaker, we might get two better reform bills based on consensus. That way, we might even get the alternative vote, which I've supported for decades. So we'd say to the government, stop trying to rig democracy, stop trying to ride roughshod over local community views, and withdraw this bill now.
The Minister, Mr.